Okay guys, I've gone through the process I was explaining to you about how I clean these parts. I took initially my alcohol solution, got it nowhere near my finish here. This is actually a little rain. We're getting ready to get rain, so I got to hustle. So I've cleaned that. I then took metal polish that I used to remove any light oxidation, and then I even did that with this. I'm sorry, I used the alcohol on this spring here and put a little oil. Any part that you've had oxidation or light rust on, once you remove that, put a very light coating of machine oil, sewing machine oil. Not a lot, because you're not lubricating it, you're sealing it against further corrosion. And then I wanted you to see the discs that I worked on. I did everything I just described to you, I did to the disc, and then I also took, this is sort of, I had like a 600 grit wet dry sandpaper, and then I went back behind it with a 1500 grit. These are things you can get in a hardware store. And the reason I did this is, even though these discs were not that bad, as the thread comes around, you want the thread to have a nice smooth surface, because anything that catches it is either going to damage the thread or it's going to cause you tension issues. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is, you just want to use the lightest grit of these wet dry sandpapers, because you're simply knocking off very shallow surface pitting. You never want to sand these too hard, because if you scuff the metal and create too much texture in the metal, you're going to harm your thread. So this is a delicate thing you want to do. Don't be overzealous with this. And when I rub my fingers across this, I put a little oil to kind of polish them, and they feel perfectly smooth. So never take rough sandpaper to this stuff. Again, I used a 600 grit very carefully, and then I went back with a 1500 grit. This is what you would call very fine polishing. And then this piece, the piece that's going to catch our thread here, it actually didn't have any corrosion. It was just, had some dirt and some old oil. So I cleaned here. I cleaned my check spring. I'm going to be putting this back on. Again, if you do it this way and you're not sure, just remember this is at the top on this machine, on this model. So keep moving around, and you will feel that piece, you'll feel the little notch move forward, and you'll feel it sort of seat itself. And next up, of course, are the discs. These are the parts that your thread is going to be moving past. So we'll put those in like that. Oh, and by the way, they face each other. They're sort of like the tops of a bagel or a donut, and they're going to face each other. And then the convex, the concave ends are going to be on the outside. I'm going to put those in like that. Next up is your, this is a sort of a set ring, if you will. Make sure that the plus side is on the right. And we're going to line it up here and press it in. And then, of course, next is our spring, and this is where a lot of the tension gets set. Again, I took alcohol, I cleaned off any surface rust, and she's good to go. There's generally in these parts, you don't often see heavy, massive rust unless they were exposed to moisture. But it was very light surface rust. I cleaned that off with alcohol, and then I put a light coating of oil with a Q-tip, and now it's perfectly fine. If you can restore a vintage hardware part, to me, it's much preferable to having reproduction, although you will be happy to know that if you lose a part or can't find one, a lot of these old Singers have reproduction parts, which can be a godsend. So again, I'm putting this little stop washer back on, and remember, you want the little finger at 12 o'clock, and you want it it's going to arch toward you, not away from you. These little details do make a difference if you want this to work properly. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting on the number dial. And of course, the number dial needs to start with 0. There's a little plastic notch here. Ooh, I don't know if I'm in focus here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a little plastic notch in here. And that notch needs to be on the right side of this little finger on the prior piece I just described to you. And that'll make sense in a moment when we go to put this back on. So, 1 drop of oil for my bolt here that my set screw is going on to. And now I'm going to push in, start at 0, push in, and I'll hear this little the notch on this snap in, and voila, we're done. And it is now raining, so I need to hustle. I'll be back with the next installment.